Part 1. The beginning of a global rivalry. Imagine two of the most powerful countries on Earth facing each other across the same table. One is the United States, a global superpower with allies around the world. The other is China, a rising power with enormous economic and military power. Their relationship is not simply friendship or hostility. It is a complicated story of cooperation, competition, mistrust, and ambition. Today, China and the United States are closely connected. American consumers buy products made in China, while American companies have built enormous businesses around Chinese factories and markets. At the same time, Washington and Beijing compete for influence, technology, trade, and strategic power. To understand why their relationship is so complicated, we have to go back to the beginning. During much of the Cold War, the United States and the People's Republic of China stood on opposite sides of an ideological divide. After the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949, Washington did not recognize Beijing as the legitimate government of China for many years. Relations were tense, and the Korean War pushed the two countries even further apart. But geopolitics began to change in the 1970s. The United States and China discovered that they shared an important concern: the growing power of the Soviet Union. In 1972, President Richard Nixon made his historic visit to China. It was a turning point. Former rivals were beginning to see each other as possible partners. In 1979, the United States and China formally established diplomatic relations. Economic ties then expanded rapidly. China began opening its economy and becoming a major center of manufacturing. American businesses saw a vast new market, while China gained access to investment, technology, and international trade. The relationship appeared to benefit both sides. American companies gained access to inexpensive manufacturing and Chinese consumers. China gained wealth, technology, and a stronger position in the global economy. But success created a new problem. China was no longer simply a manufacturing center. It was becoming a major economic, technological, and military power. Washington increasingly viewed Beijing not only as a partner, but also as its most important long-term strategic competitor. And that is where our story really begins. In the next part, we will look at the economic and technology battle between China and America, and why this competition could affect the future of the entire world. Part 2. The battle for economic and technological power. As China grew stronger, the relationship with the United States began to change. The two countries were still doing enormous amounts of business with each other, but behind the scenes, competition was becoming increasingly intense. For decades, American companies depended on Chinese manufacturing, while China depended heavily on international markets. This created a powerful economic connection between the two nations. But it also created fear in Washington that the United States had become too dependent on China for important products and supply chains. Then came a major turning point. In 2018, the United States and China entered a major trade conflict. Washington imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, accusing China of unfair trade practices and problems involving technology and intellectual property. Beijing responded with tariffs of its own. The trade war showed something important. Economic power had become a weapon. But the competition did not stop with trade. The next battlefield was technology. The United States has long been a leader in advanced technology, while China has invested enormous resources into becoming a technological superpower. Both countries want leadership in artificial intelligence, telecommunications, advanced computing, robotics, and especially semiconductors. Semiconductors may look small, but they are at the heart of the modern world. Smartphones, cars, satellites, weapons, data centers, and artificial intelligence systems all depend on advanced chips. That is why Washington began restricting China's access to some of the world's most advanced semiconductor technology and manufacturing equipment. The goal was to slow China's ability to develop cutting-edge technologies that could have both economic and military applications. Beijing strongly opposed these restrictions and accelerated efforts to build its own technology industry. China began investing heavily in domestic chip production, artificial intelligence, and other strategic technologies. The result is a technological race that could shape the balance of power for decades. But there is another issue even more sensitive than trade or technology: Taiwan. China considers Taiwan part of its territory and has repeatedly stated that reunification is a national priority. Taiwan, meanwhile, has developed its own democratic government and has become one of the world's most important technology hubs. The United States does not have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan as an independent country, but it maintains close unofficial relations and provides defensive support. This creates a dangerous strategic triangle. China wants to prevent Taiwan from moving permanently toward independence. Taiwan wants to protect its existing system, and the United States wants to prevent any forced change to the status quo. So the question is no longer simply about economics or technology. It is about power, security, and the future of Asia. And as tensions rise, one question becomes harder to ignore. Could the rivalry between China and America eventually become a military confrontation? That is where the story takes its most dangerous turn. Part 3. The risk of a new Cold War. The economic and technological rivalry between China and the United States has now moved into an even more sensitive area, military power. Across the Indo-Pacific, both countries are strengthening their military capabilities. Partnerships with countries such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines. China, meanwhile, has rapidly modernized its navy, air force, missile systems, and other military capabilities. One of the most important areas of tension is the South China Sea. China claims extensive rights in the region, while several neighboring countries dispute parts of those claims. The United States regularly conducts operations in the region to support freedom of navigation and challenge what it considers excessive maritime claims. But Taiwan remains the most dangerous flashpoint. For Beijing, Taiwan is a core national issue. Chinese leaders have repeatedly emphasized the goal of reunification and have not ruled out the use of force. Taiwan, however, has its own government, military economy, and democratic political system. The United States follows a deliberately complicated policy toward Taiwan. Washington recognizes Beijing as the government of China, while maintaining unofficial relations with Taiwan, and this creates a delicate balance, providing defensive weapons and support. If China attempted to take Taiwan by force, the United States could face an enormous strategic decision. Direct intervention could lead to a major conflict between two nuclear-armed powers. But doing nothing could fundamentally change the balance of power in Asia. That is why Taiwan is watched so closely by governments around the world. Beyond Taiwan, China and America are also competing for influence across Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the global economy. Each country wants stronger partnerships, greater technological influence, and a larger role in shaping international rules. Some analysts call this a new Cold War. But there is an important difference. Unlike the original Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, China and America remain deeply connected through trade, finance, technology, and global supply chains. They are competitors, but they are also economically connected. So what happens next? There are several possible futures. The first is controlled competition, where both countries continue competing but avoid direct conflict. The second is deeper economic and technological separation, creating two increasingly separate global systems. And the most dangerous possibility is a military crisis, particularly over Taiwan, that neither side can control. The future of the China-America relationship will therefore affect far more than Beijing and Washington. It could influence global trade, technology, military security, and the balance of power for decades. Two superpowers, two different visions, one interconnected world. The question is not simply who will become more powerful. The real question is whether China and America can compete without turning their rivalry into a conflict that changes the world forever. Because the future of this relationship may not be written in Beijing or Washington alone. It may shape the future of all of us.